is being recorded.
Okay. Welcome to the NT Podcast, the best channel in the Balkan in the field of blending science and theology. Today we have a special guest, Tom Jump, an atheist philosopher and YouTuber known for engaging debates with Christian philosophers and theologians on topics ranging from philosophy to religion. He is the author of Objective Morality Without God. His YouTube channel is T-Jump, where he explores deep questions about ethics, existence, and belief. Tom, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. We organized this very, very fast. First email I ever sent to you is, I think, 3 hours ago. So this is exciting. And in this episode, we will be discussing the first cause cosmological argument, a classical philosophical argument for the existence of God, and really old one. So we will explore the logic behind the argument, its implications, and engage with Tom's perspective as a critic of theistic reasoning. So, Tom, could you start by telling our audience a bit about yourself? What's your background? What do you focus on? And what motivated you to engage with philosophy, debates, and discussions about religion?
Trying to meet women. That's what motivated me. Has not worked out very well. Yeah, I think my story is pretty boring. I have tons of videos describing that. I would be happy to jump into the argument because that's the part that I find interesting.
Oh, no worries. Let's do that. So, what do you think about Aquinas' second way? That's a really old one, so let's start with those. It goes like this. Some things are caused. Whatever is caused by another. There cannot be an infinite series of causes. So there must be an uncaused cause or God. So what is your comment on this, General?
Well, there's a number of different problems with the argument, but the most obvious is that even if we just grant everything in the argument, the uncaused cause could just be a quantum field or a quantum particle or just any naturalistic thing. There's nothing about the argument that implies a God whatsoever. Secondly, there could be an infinite regressive causes. There's no logical contradiction there. That was shown in many different versions of the argument. There is no logical contradiction with an infinite regress. It's just unintuitive. And the fact that it's unintuitive isn't an argument against the possibility. But I tend to agree that I don't like infinite regresses. So I tend to also agree that there should be some kind of necessary cause if you want to define it as such. And the most plausible explanation of a necessary cause is more likely some kind of a quantum particle than a God, because we have lots of evidence of quantum particles. We have evidence that they can be outside of space-time. We have no evidence of supernatural beings who can cause donkeys to talk and have spiritual things that happen after our deaths. There's no evidence of any of that, but there's lots of evidence of quantum particles. And so if we want to say that there is some kind of necessary being, it's far more plausible to say it's one of the things we actually have evidence for, like quantum particles, rather than something we have no evidence for, like a God.
All right, I agree most of the things. So I like your discussion with Joshua Rasmussen. He said, I like naturalism, but I want to make it better. So that's a fun clip about that. So let's try another version. Here is a version from my friend. Let's start from what we observe from empirical knowledge. Things have causes. Would you agree with that premise?
Sort of yes, sort of no. So in physics, we've demonstrated that no, some things just don't have causes. Randomness is a fundamental force in nature. That is the consensus in physics. So there are lots of events that literally just don't have causes. But for colloquial, intuitive purposes, I can grant the argument that, yeah, as far as human interaction is concerned, things appear to have causes.
All right, but we need not to say all things are caused, but we just can say, okay, we see things that are caused, and we go backward and ask whether the causal chain is infinite, or whether there is a random beginning from nothing, or a cyclical loop. That is whether the first cause is caused by something from the future, or whether we have a first uncaused or eternal cause. What seems most sensible? An infinite causal regress, cyclical loop, or cause appearing from nowhere, or an eternal first cause? What would you say?
Well, I say all of them have equal basis. So there's no one that is more or less reasonable. But I go back to the same criticism I have in the previous argument, even if we just grant the argument, and we can take any one of those routes, infinite regress, a circular kind of future causation, or a necessary cause, any of those can just be natural. There's no reason that any of the conclusions would lead to a God. So all of those things are still explained by a natural cause, a natural quantum field that is a necessary being, a natural infinite regress, a natural random quantum fluctuation. All of those, there's natural explanations for all of those.
Right. Would you at least agree that those are only options? There are no other options, or no?
Probably not. I think that there are probably other options, just harder to understand. So like B theory of time, they're just everything. There isn't a causation. It just all exists at the same instance.
Yes. Okay. Let's grant A theory. It's much easier to discuss on that. So okay. Let's say like this: in the first stage of this argument, under the first eternal cause, one could also propose options like for an atheist, singularity or quantum field or anything else, which are eternal first causes of a sort. Wouldn't we, in the first stage, say that it seems more reasonable that the cosmos is not a result, the result of an infinite regress or random appearances, or a cause that starts the chain that leads to itself, since that sounds paradoxical, right? So can we agree that it is probably that there is some first eternal cause, even if that's a singularity or quantum field?
Yeah, I tend to lean that way. Sure. I don't think physics does, but I tend to think intuitively that makes the most sense.
Okay, can we proceed to second stage now? So let us consider what this eternal first cause is like. Even Aristotle and the ancient Greeks mentioned a trichotomy of the ways in which things operate. So first, according to necessity, second, randomly, for example, some quantum theories, and third, by free will or free choice. So there are fundamental ways in which the objects we observe in the world function. So would you agree until now?
I'm not sure. So what's the question again?
Yes, question is, would you agree that things that we observe in the world function according to three ways? Necessity, randomly, or free will?
No. So there's no such thing as free will. That's essentially been philosophically disproven. It doesn't exist. Necessity, I don't think there has ever been demonstrated that there is a necessity in the universe. Randomness has been demonstrated to exist. So we know in physics, randomness is a fundamental thing in the universe. So of those three, randomness is the only one that's actually been demonstrated in physics. Free will is a philosophical concept, which doesn't really count in physics. We don't really care. Physics is the closest thing we have to ontology and what exists. Philosophy isn't. So free will has just no bearing. Randomness wins over free will every time because of the evidence we have in physics of it. Necessity would probably be second best. There is no actual definition of necessity in physics. It just doesn't exist. It's just the closest thing would just be a thing that does exist, or appearance of relations, but there's no definition of necessity in physics. It doesn't exist. So randomness exists and objects exist, but those are the only two things we can say in physics. Everything else is like distant.
Right. But even if we reject some of those three, would you agree that there is no other option that things in the world function?
Again, no. So I wouldn't say it's only these options. Those are just the most commonly interpreted. There's probably going to be more, like the B theory of time or other things that we just don't know about.
Yeah. So do you hold A or B theory of time? Let me ask
I don't
quickly.
have a position on it. I don't know if either one, there's evidence for either one being correct.
Okay. So right. Wouldn't you say that there are some necessary things like logic? Would you say that 2 + 2 is equals 4? That's necessary truth. So, or no?
No, definitely not. Logic is a language invented by humans. There are necessary truths. It's just a concept we made up. There isn't such a thing as a necessary truth in physics. It just doesn't exist. There are non-standard logics, and those could correspond to reality. I don't tend to think that they do, but necessary truths aren't like a law of physics. It's just a concept we've made up in our heads. So if we're trying to make a parallel to what is the fundamental nature of reality, the concepts that we've come up in philosophy just aren't related. We just don't care. What we do care about are things like what's been demonstrated in the field of physics, randomness, quantum fields. Those things are likely to correspond to the fundamental nature of reality far more than philosophical concepts we've come up with. And just to quote Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, logic is a formal language. It's just a language. We made it up.
Right, interesting. Okay, so you granted first stage. So can we ask now? Let's see it like this. We have eternity in which there exists first eternal cause, and it does nothing for all eternity. And then at one point it acts, and activity occurs that produces an effect, thus beginning the causal chain that produces the cosmos in which we live, with natural laws and so on. So does this story best explains that the eternal cause operates according to determinism, randomness, or free will, even if you rejected two of those?
Also, from a logical standpoint, all three would equally explain the data. The fact that free will is logically contradictory kind of omits it as a possibility, but from it being a random perspective, perfectly explains the data. If there's some set of times and there's a random causation that makes things happen at time t equals 5 million versus time t equals 2, the probability is the same, fully explains the data. Deterministically, it could be determined to cause things at time t equals 2000 versus times t equals 2, fully explains the data. And so the only one that wouldn't explain the data is free will.
Okay, let's go one by one. So under determinism, we would expect regularity, necessity, rules by which things always necessarily proceed. So by that reasoning, we would expect that the first eternal cause, which never created anything before, would either always continue to produce, or if it does something, would have been producing eternally. But neither is the case. The first cause does nothing.
That's not true. So like determinism is just the fact that it is causally required to do some action. That action doesn't need to be an eternal action. It doesn't need to be always produced or produced at the very beginning. It could be determined to do something at time 37 and it's still determined. I think you're conflating the fact that something is determined with the fact that it is going to do something forever. And that's just not the case. There's no logical contradiction with something being determined to wait and then do something. And only
Okay, do you have a yes, yes. Thank you for this critic. Yeah. So, do you have any example that there is some determined thing or object or anything cause that do something at the time t and never again or something like that?
a clock.
Um, how do you mean? Sorry.
Well, so clocks move at an increment, like atomic clocks move based off an increment of the rotation of the electrons. Regular clocks move based off of the weight of the gear. So there's an increment of time, and it doesn't move until the increment is passed. So the universe could be the same thing. There could be, or they say there's a necessary particle. The necessary particle was going to create the universe, create the space-time field, and it only did so when some kind of interlocking other fields that weren't space-time caused some kind of interaction. And if they didn't have an interaction, then they wouldn't do it. And so there could be a delay of any arbitrary set of time before these two other fields that weren't space-time interacted. And then when they did, poof, you have space-time.
Okay, but wouldn't that prove my case? Because if we see clock, it gives increment, and that's always repeated. How to say event or yeah.
Well, no, I can make a clock that only goes once and then breaks or stops. Like there's lots of programs we do that for. The Hello World program, you write the program that says Hello World, you press enter, post Hello World, and then stops. So like you can make a clock that only does it once.
Yeah, but we are intelligent beings, so we can do something. But do you have in nature things that do something only once and never again?
Sure, something becoming a black hole. It happens once, never again.
Okay. Okay, good point. Okay, what about randomness? It sounds slightly more plausible than this, even, but yet what happens afterward is the creation of an ordered cosmos, which does not sound random at all. So we would expect much more chaos, contrary to an ordered cosmos that operates under law.
Well, that's very strange because if it's random, by definition, the outcome of the universe, whether it's ordered or not ordered, would be equally as random. Like if you have the numbers 666, like imagine you have like 20 dice and you roll all of them. The probability that it would come up 6666666 is the exact same as the probability to come up with 1 3 5 7 2 4 6, whatever. So the argument that it doesn't look random doesn't make any sense because the probability of a perfect alignment of sixes with 20 dice is the exact same as any other combination you see. And so the fact that it looks random or looks ordered to us doesn't mean anything. The question would be, randomness makes more sense because we have lots of evidence of randomness. Science has demonstrated that particles can pop in and out of existence randomly with no cause. It's the Casimir effect and other quantum particles. And so because this has an empirical basis in reality, it is always going to be a better explanation than anything that doesn't have an empirical basis in reality. Kind of like if you see a hoof print in the snow, horse is always going to be a better explanation than a unicorn because we have evidence of horses but no evidence of unicorns. And so randomness, because it has a basis, is always better than anything that doesn't.
All right, thank you, Tom. So, if you grant that there is a free will, I know that you don't believe that. So, let's say that there is, but if we consider like this, this first cause that is eternal uh, fits first stage perfectly almost. So, uh, sorry, just let me know, find. Yeah, it looks like a decision. We have nothing, and then like some choice, and we have ordered cosmos. So, would you say if free will exists, then this is maybe probable?
Well, that doesn't make sense to me. So the first thing is I know of no decisions that weren't caused by things. I know of no decisions that there was nothing and then there was a decision. All decisions were caused by prior reasons. So like I decided to get pizza because I like pizza and I was hungry. And so these things caused an electrical signal to build up in my brain, which led to the action or decision to get pizza. I have never seen any decision that has not been preceded deterministically or randomly by other reasons. So it doesn't make sense to me to make an analogy between the all of the decisions we have seen empirically, which are all determined or random, to say that those are somehow this new third kind of thing of just completely independent causa sui from nothing. Like there's just no evidence that any decision like that has ever existed. Whereas all the evidence we have is that when we look at an MRI, we can predict your decisions before you make them, and we're continuing to be able to do so with higher and higher degrees of accuracy. So that would be the first problem with the argument. Second is, let's just say that that is a thing, free will is a thing or whatever. How can you have this decision to go from a state of no choice to a state of choice? Is that either done? It must either be done for reasons or no reasons. It's either so going from a state of no decision to a state of decision. Either that was done for a reason, like there was some deterministic cause that led to that change in state from no reason to or from no decision to decision, or it was done for literally no reason. In which case it's random by definition. That's what randomness is something that a change of state based off of no reasons. So it seems like those two things cover the entire logical spectrum, P or not P. And so I can't even comprehend what it means for a causa sui thing to exist there to provide a third option.
Okay, thank you again. So, what do you think, or how would you explain introspection? Uh, does that prove in any way free will?
What do you mean by introspection? Just the thinking about your own decisions?
Yes, like yeah, thinking about some decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's just deterministic as a part of any neurology is. And so like when I think of an elephant, it's not because of some magic causa sui part of my brain or my soul that's doing that. It's my brain. My brain has associated introspection with the idea of an elephant and the idea of thinking of an elephant and the colors of an elephant, a pink elephant specifically, which causes me to think of those things because of the prior association in this conversation about introspection. Since you said the word introspection, it caused the parts of my brains to light up, which brought the image of a pink elephant to my head because of my past experience. That was all determined. There's no part of that that is causa sui. It's all just determined aspects of my consciousness.
Okay, what about creativity and innovation? If we are determined, we wouldn't maybe expect so much creativity by humans, or no?
Well, I mean, we can see all the creativity by humans can essentially be copied by AI right now. You just go on Chat GPT, say, generate a picture of a pirate holding a bunny, and it'll do it with a higher level of degree of detail than human brains normally would. So I don't know of anything, an example of creativity that would not be an example of determined results or random results.
Yeah, sorry. Wouldn't that prove that that's human creativity again? Because AI is made by humans also. So, you know.
Well, AI is determined. So if AI can produce creativity and AI is a fully determined system, then that would demonstrate the creativity in humans can be produced by fully determined systems, and it would not require some kind of causa sui new feature of the universe.
Is it fully determined, or is there some control by humans? I don't know, really.
Well, it's determined by the
Is it too
programming.
much to say?
So AI is completely
Yeah,
determined by the
there is a
programming.
control. Yeah, okay, I don't know. I just asked. Okay. So, yes, what about moral responsibility? We hold people morally accountable for their actions. So maybe that would go with free will.
Well, morality doesn't require free will. There's a multitude of different versions of morality that have nothing to do with free will or accountability. It's more just mostly utilitarian, consequentialist views. It doesn't make a difference whether or not you have free will. Like deontological views doesn't matter if you have free will. Free will is just one interpretation of morality. It's not required for morality.
Yeah, and last about free will, we have intuition, so it really seems like we have a free will. Would you agree? Because if the determinism were absolute, no one could have done otherwise. Since people have often some different choices, it seems that free will is real, right?
Maybe if it was like 1,000 years ago, our intuition of free will, maybe that argument might work. But now, because we have MRIs and fMRIs that have been done on the brain that show that we can predict what people's decisions are going to make before they make them by just looking at their brain state, that has essentially just been debunked. It's been disproven by scientific experiment. So prior to us discovering the interactions in the brain that allow us to predict decisions, you could say that our intuition may count as some weak evidence of there being free will. But now that we have the scientific evidence that decisions can be predicted just by brain states, by looking at a brain and knowing what you're going to pick left or right, up or down, blue, green, that's essentially been disproven.
Okay, what about Heisenberg uncertainty principle? Michio Kaku comments on this, stating it means in some sense we do have some kind of free will. No one can determine your future events given your past history. There is always a wild card. There is always the possibility of uncertainty in whatever we do.
Well, that's just randomness. So that wouldn't be free will. So I grant that randomness is a thing. But to say that you made a decision because of a random fluctuation in your brain, I don't think you or any theist would define that as free will. And so it doesn't seem like your interpretation of what he is saying would agree with the theistic interpretation of what free will is. If by free will you just mean randomness, we can agree. The next, like, fine, free will is just random fluctuations in your brain. But then again, you're not culpable for your actions anymore because it wasn't you who did the action; it was the randomness that did the action. And so that would, if we grant Michio Kaku's quotes, that would undermine your own argument for morality, because you would no longer be culpable for any action because the kind of free will that you have is just randomness.
Okay, I agree on this one. It's really correct. I think that it's random just. Okay, so what do you think on Craig's argument? He would say that first cause is immaterial because it created matter. So does it sound to you or not?
Well, I don't think that's the conclusion of the Big Bang. The Big Bang Theory just says that space and time were created, and just our space and time. It doesn't say that there couldn't be another space time that exists out there independent of ours. It doesn't say that there couldn't be matter independent of ours. So there's nothing about the Big Bang that implies the creation of all natural, all space-time stuff. It just doesn't exist. There's no implication there. And pretty much all physicists agree that something existed prior to the Big Bang, whether it's a quantum field or a string theory or whatever. And so it's just the class of things, of spatial temporal stuff, and the field of space-time was created at the Big Bang. But that there could, as there most likely is, other fields that are not space-time that predate space-time. And of course, by date here, it's analogous because space and time didn't exist. So it's just a different field that existed prior to space-time.
Yes, I agree with you also. So yeah, he would put argument if it's immaterial, but yeah, you prove that it doesn't have to be. But if it's a material, then he only can think on numbers and on mind. So it's not numbers because numbers cannot create universe or anything. So he would say that's mind or agent with free will. Is it good way of thinking?
Oh, again, no, because I know of no examples of minds that aren't physical. Like, there's never been demonstrated a non-physical mind to exist. And so saying that a non-physical mind could cause the Big Bang because it's non-physical is like saying there's a non-physical pineapple that could cause the Big Bang. We have no examples of non-physical pineapples, and we have no examples of non-physical minds. So it wouldn't make sense to say that those things are plausible explanations of a non-physical source. What would be a better example would be a new kind of quantum field or string theory or some kind of thing at that level that is just outside of the field of space-time. If it's outside of the field of space-time, then you can call that immaterial in the sense that it doesn't compose of the stuff that we know of as material. But there's no implication that it's non-natural. It could just be, again, just a different field that isn't space-time.
Yeah, what about miracles? Because we have some testimonies that some angels or spirits do something. Maybe that's the example that the mind can do something.
I know of no confirmed evidence of miracle claims. Like, every time it's been tested, it's been shown false. Every time they've done miracle studies, like in hospitals where they did mass miracles studies to see if that actually worked to improve things, they found that the vast majority of them had no effects. Some of them had negative effects. Some of them had positive effects. The conclusion was that there's no scientific evidence that miracles have any effect whatsoever. And so there is no reason to think that miracle claims or miracle instances actually exist independent of our imagination, because it's never been demonstrated to exist. So the claims are no different than the claims that I saw a leprechaun last week, or I prayed over my friend and his cancer got cured. Like, you can make a claim and it can be true, that's what you saw, but to justify the belief that it actually exists independent of your imagination, you would need novel testable predictions in order to show that it wasn't just one of the thousands of biases or illusions that exist in the human mind. And so all such claims are better explained by biases, delusions, illusions, misconceptions, uh, things in the brain that we know about and have evidence for, rather than something we don't have evidence for. to go back to my example, if you see a hoof print in the snow, horse is always a better explanation than unicorn because we have evidence of horses.
Okay, Tom, how would you comment events like Lady of Zaitun or Fatima or any Mary appearances?
Well, the Fatima case is pretty easy. Like a bunch of people were staring at the sun. Like if you've stared at the sun for any prolonged period of time, you see a lot of weird stuff. Like if you stare at the sun, you're going to have a lot of weird visions. Secondly, there's this psychological delusion called communal reinforcement. So like if you have a bunch of people who see a flash in the sky and somebody says, "Oh, it's a UFO," and then the person next to it says, "Yeah, it's a UFO." That belief can spread across the people and they can come up with a collaborative story to make it seem like they all experienced the same thing, even though they just experienced something they couldn't explain and came up with a narrative together, which they all then collectively believed, called communal reinforcement. And so in big groups like the Miracle of Fatima, that's a big factor. So communal reinforcement, and then bereavement delusion is another one. People who have loved ones who died recently, they can hear and see them talk. Again, just a figment of their imagination because of habitual learned things. So they expect to hear the dishes being done or the newspaper being turned because it's happened so many times in the past when their loved one was there and that's what they did. None of that is evidence of miracles. So in every one of those cases, it's just a combination of very common delusions, hallucinations, and fallacies that we know of, like communal reinforcement delusions, bereavement delusion, those kinds of things. Like there's nothing about that would indicate an actual change in physics.
Okay, let's get back to our first cause or first many causes. I don't know how to say. Would you agree that it doesn't need to be just one? Maybe there is at least one, so maybe more.
Sure. Yeah, there's no limit to the amount of causes that there could be. And it could be like a collaborative thing where 6 or 7 causes interacted to produce our universe, or just one. Or there could be different causes of different universes.
Right, I agree with you. So, would you say that maybe parsimony principle would help us to say that, yeah, it's easier to say or more simple to say that there is just one, or no?
From an epistemic standpoint, the reason we use the principle of parsimony is to simplify our conceptual models to be able to explain the data. But we don't use the principle of parsimony to simplify the ontological things. So, like, to give you an example, we can say that there is only one electron and it's traveling through time in order to occupy the space around every single particle. And that would simplify things. Instead of saying there are just this insane number of electrons everywhere in the universe around every single particle, it's just one. It's one electron. And that would be simpler. There would be more parsimonious to say there is one electron rather than billions and billions and billions and billions of electrons. Do we do that? No, we don't do that. Just because it would be simpler doesn't mean it's true. The application of the principle of parsimony is epistemic. If we can mathematically do the work to show everything that we're seeing can be explained with a simpler equation, we'll use the simpler equation because it's simpler. Does that mean that the things that we're seeing ontologically are less particles? No, it's irrelevant. And so there isn't any reason ontologically to think that there's only one first cause rather than 10 first causes, other than the fact it's just less assumptions are being made into the argument. And so until we have evidence to indicate one or the other, there's no real way to determine anything about how many things there are there.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm interested. Do you believe in the Craig's first premise on column argument, the causal principle that whatever begins to exist has a cause? Would you agree that it's more probably no?
No, that's the thing. In physics, we've already debunked that. Randomness is a fundamental force. Particles can pop in and out of existence without cause. That's just like a thing we've demonstrated in physics, which just disproves the first premise of the Kalam.
Okay, what is an example? Sorry.
Casimir effect.
Can you repeat, please?
The Casimir effect, Casimir, something like that. Casimir effect. It's when they had a vacuum. They took two metal sheets that are very small, put them next to each other, and virtual particles that popped in and out of existence push the sheets together. So we know for a fact that there's these virtual particles that are uncaused that pop in and out of existence, and they can interact with things.
Wouldn't you say that it's indeterministic cause rather than it's uncaused?
No, so it's like based on the models of physics that predicted these things. The models said there are these fields which caused virtual particles which are uncaused as a consequence of this model. And so this model made a prediction that there are these uncaused things that pop in and out of existence that we're predicting that will exist. And then they do an experiment which confirms the prediction. That's evidence that their hypothesis is true. They made a novel testable prediction that was unexpected in any other model and said, if our model, which is that there are these virtual particles that pop in and out of existence and are uncaused, if our model is true, we will see this effect in this experiment. And they got it right. That's evidence that their hypothesis is true. Now, you can post hoc explain that in infinitely many other ways because of the problem of underdetermination. But the fact that their model got it right first and best means that it's evidence of their conclusion, which is that it's uncaused. And all of the physics indicates it's uncaused. There's nothing in physics that would explain any cause there. That's why the consensus in physics is that randomness is a fundamental force of nature. It's not just apparent.
Wouldn't most physicists say that there is a previous state in virtual particles or anything?
No. So there's actually a poll on this. The Fundamental Attitudes in Quantum Mechanics by Schlosshauser is the name of the poll. And one of the questions is specifically, is randomness only apparent? So like there's previous states that cause it. Is it there's like four options, but one of the options is it's a fundamental aspect of nature. Randomness is an irreducible fundamental aspect of nature, and that is the one that got the vast majority of votes from physicists. So to answer your question, that question has been asked to physicists, and they said no, randomness is fundamental.
Okay. What about initial changeless for first cause? Would you agree that if the cause is first, it should be initially changeless? Yeah.
No.
Why?
Because so by first cause, we're essentially talking about the first cause of our universe. That doesn't imply there's no change of any kind ever prior to that. So like if you want to say like the first instance of change ever, it would make more sense that that was one of these random fluctuations that are uncaused than anything else. So because we know or have evidence of these random fluctuations that are uncaused, what was the first kind of change of state ever? It's most likely that would make the most sense. We have evidence of random uncaused things, and we want to say that the first cause was a completely uncaused thing. That would make the most sense.
Okay, so if we define that as an event because every event is like cause or something like that, because if you have some change, that's cause, I think. So if we define like that, so we then should expect that it's initially changeless, right?
Well, no. So again, the fact that something was caused doesn't mean it was caused by something. So like if there was a random fluctuation of virtual particles just pop in and out of existence that are uncaused, there doesn't need to be a changeless state before that. There could just be nothing. There's nothing before that. It's just one of the things that just happens. And so that could just be the first instance of change ever. And there's nothing prior to that.
Okay, thank you. So that's all. I'm interested if you grant that this first cause have a free will, would that be God in that case? But that's a huge thing to grant. But if that has a free will and if free will exists, is that something like God, supreme being, anything?
Well, if free will existed and if free will was the cause of the universe, that doesn't mean anything to like a god, because there could still be another free will before that, or council of free wills, or it could just be a kid in his basement 800 million years from now who just thought us into existence because the computers are that powerful. So even if we grant that there is free will and the free will caused our universe, does that mean that that thing is the ultimate creator of the universe? Well, no, it could just be a kid in the future, or a computer program that we're all in a simulation. So just granting that there is free will and the universe is caused by free will doesn't get us to the conclusion of a fundamental creator of the universe, because there's another layer of evidence you would need beyond that, um, to show that there is some stopping point, that there is this is the final thing and there's nothing beyond it, kind of a thing, which is not something science usually claims. Science almost never claims that, and that's one of the major differences between science and religion.
Yeah, I would agree that it's not deduction, so it must be God. But at least could we say that if we grant all those things, it's the best explanation because come on, it's eternal. It has a power over the cosmos in that level, so it has a free will, choice. So it sounds like God. Come on.
Um, Probably not. So if I was going to say we grant free will or grant is conscious, and we say what are the different possible conscious entities that could have created the universe? A god with infinite knowledge, infinite wisdom, and infinite morality, or a crazy kid in the future. And we look at the way the universe is, the immorality, suffering, cancer in children, the fact that 99.9% of the universe has no life. It makes way more sense to say that the consciousness that created the universe isn't all moral, isn't perfectly wise, isn't good, isn't doesn't really care about us. Those would make more sense than to say it's a perfectly moral being that created the universe.
Okay, but what if that being is not infinitely powerful or omnipotent? It's limited in some way, but it's good. It's yeah, morally perfect.
Well, the morality is one of the big problems, because looking at how immoral the world is, it is unlikely that a perfectly moral being created this world. Even if it's not all powerful, if a perfectly moral being existed, the only world it would create would be a world where it is impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing. And it would just create the maximum number of consciousnesses in that kind of world. And so the world that we do see wouldn't make sense that it was created by a perfectly moral being, even if the perfectly moral being didn't have infinite power. Because if a perfectly moral being existed, it would only create a world where there was no involuntary imposition of will. No one would be able to be forced to do things they don't consent to doing. And it would just create as many people as it was powerful enough to create under those circumstances. And so, looking at our world, it makes much more sense that it is either immoral or uncaring.
Okay, but Professor Goff would say, like, he wanted to make a good world, but he couldn't, and he would say, like, "Oh, sorry, I wanted the best world, but oops, I didn't do that. So sorry, I do what I can." So, can we say in that manner?
No, that wouldn't work. One second, let me get a cough drop. My throat's a little sore. I'll be back in 1 second.
Okay, okay.
All right. All right. So the argument would be that there is a God who can't do literally anything. And so, but he's still perfectly moral. So, what kind of universe would such a God create? And the answer to that would be the most morally perfect world possible. given his limitations. Now, if we can get a definition of what a most perfectly moral world would be, and I believe I have one, which is a world that is impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing. And then we say, let's apply limitations to the God and see, well, what is the closest this God could make to such a world? The answer is very easy, because given what we see in this world, using only the limitations that have been of the laws of physics in this world, we could create a world like the perfectly moral world I described. It's just using extra laws of physics. In fact, we're getting closer to that world given our advancements in science. And so if a God existed who has the limitations that you're implying, he could still give each of us our own planet and have us be born on that planet independent of each other, and give each of us powers over physics to govern that planet however we want. And that would essentially create a morally perfect world, because nothing you could do could ever hurt anyone else. Now, if you wanted to add interaction between humans, we can teleport and interact, but only if we consent to obey the rules of their world. Again, that's perfectly physically possible. So there's nothing about the world I described that wouldn't be possible for a God to do if it was morally perfect and had power enough to create the universe as we see it.
Okay, Tom, thank you so much. So, okay, even if the first cause is singularity, quantum field, anything else, we can ask question, why anything at all? Because we have all these things and cosmos and anything. So, why that exists even?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, this is argument from contingency, because it could be that our cosmos doesn't exist at all, so everything blank, empty. So why there is anything?
Well, it'd still go back to the same. Either it was determined or it was random. Either it was determined by the nature of the quantum particle, or it was random, like the virtual particles. The same thing would apply to God. Like, why, if you ask, why did God create the universe? Either he was determined to by his moral nature, or he randomly decided to. So, whether or not you think the universe was created by a necessary being, why the necessary being created our universe is always going to fall back to those two things. Either it was determined by its nature or it was random.
Okay, good answer. So my question for the end is, after all these years of studying, talking to different people, debating with experts, what is your personal conclusion regarding the existence of God? How likely do you think it is that God exists? Is it zero or maybe more also?
The God as defined in the Abrahamic books, 0%. God as a general concept, probably in less than 1%.
Okay, so you wouldn't rule out totally, but yeah, that's enormously small. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, last question for you, Tom. What message would you like to share with our audience, especially Christian viewers? What can we learn from your perspective, and what should we pay attention when thinking about these big questions?
I think the most interesting perspective is that for a Christian argument to work and to be evidence of God, it would need to indicate the God hypothesis more than the naturalist hypothesis. And that's a consideration that most theists don't think about. Can a natural physical quantum field explain this? And if you know anything about philosophy, the answer is always going to be yes, because of the problem of underdetermination. And so, in order to really get evidence of a God, what you need is novel, testable predictions. If my God hypothesis is correct, here is something we predict about the future that the naturalist hypothesis doesn't predict. Like if you die, you go to heaven. Great evidence of a God, phenomenal evidence. But until we have that, the fact that the naturalist hypothesis has been the only one that's made the successful predictions means that's the one you should go with. Now, you could, of course, just say, I like theism better, and that's perfectly fine. But to say that there's evidence of theism is a very weak argument. Also, I'm open to any other debates if anyone wants to set them up for me. If you'd like to set them up, that'd be great. I'm just too lazy to do it anymore.
All right. Thank you, Tom, for joining us and sharing your thoughts on the first cause cosmological argument. For our audience, the takeaway is this. The debate over the first cause isn't just about abstract philosophy. It challenges us to think critically about existence, the cosmos, and the foundations of our understanding. So whether one agrees or disagrees, exploring these arguments helps sharpen our reasoning and deepen our engagement with big questions about reality and belief. So dear audience, please subscribe to our channel, NT Podcast, like this video and comment if you have a question. Also follow T-Jump, his channel. So until next time, stay faithful, but never stop asking tough questions. Goodbye.
The recording has stopped.
Awesome.
Okay, that's it. Thank you